Hi, everybody, and welcome back to A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Today is a very special episode. You guys haven't heard from him since season 2 when we did A Catholic's Perspective on politics. So I'm very happy to welcome back John Doyle. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, very excited to be back.
It's been a hot minute. And also, I think that this is, considering the state of the world today, I think that this podcast is very needed.
I agree. Yeah, people haven't heard from me for a while on your channel, on my channel, so it's good to get out there.
Yeah, you're coming back out into the social media world. So
Right.
that'll be good. And yeah, this is going to be quite the doozy. We're going to go over a lot of stuff today, but very quickly, where can people find you just real quick?
You can find me on YouTube, which is John Doyle. You can find me on Twitter at Comrade Doyle, Instagram at johndoyle.jpg, etc.
Okay, awesome. So, John, the election cycle this year, what is happening?
Well, Donald Trump is in the one corner trying to make America great again, and then you've got Democrats in the opposing corner who are trying to not make America great again, and rather to try to just completely implode our country and institute like total power and authority over American patriots and American Christians. And so those are our two choices, basically.
That's so great. Okay. Also, I think, there has been so much that has been going on for the last 4 years. And not just that, but the last couple months, Trump was almost assassinated. Biden dropped out when it seemed like he didn't really know he dropped out, then disappeared for a couple days. And people were like, oh my gosh, he's dead. And then he came back and stuff. And then Kamala's taking over again. And now basically her entire website is just like a merch website, and she's using the brats from, what was it, Charlie XCX or whatever, to do. What is happening to politics?
Yeah, I mean, they are trying to galvanize their base, which for someone like Kamala Harris is going to be a mixture of girl bosses and gay men. And unfortunately, you have a lot of girl bosses and gay men on the right. And so they'll see those ad campaigns and they're like, message received. This is making me excited. And so I'm like, wait a minute, there might be some momentum behind Kamala's campaign, which I don't think there is. And then with the Trump assassination, too, I mean, yeah, the guy literally came within an inch of his life. God intervened, whether it was a gust of wind or he turned his head at the right moment or something, and saved his life. And that was, in a very selfish sense, I'm glad that that did not happen. Like, even ignoring the ramifications that would have had for our country, I'm very glad that that did not happen, because I think I would have snapped. I don't think that I would have been able to handle seeing that happen. Because it would not have been like a Zapruder tape where it's 100 yards away and it's grainy footage. I mean, they wanted it to be 4K resolution. You see the president's head explode. I mean, anywhere for the rest of your life where you had said anything that was even remotely to the right of Kamala Harris, they would have been replying to your tweets or sending you Instagram messages with that GIF showing that happening to the president's head. They would have merchandised it. You would have walked into your office, the following Monday morning, and they would have been drinking out of coffee mugs that had that image on it. Because for better or worse, people on the left view Donald Trump to be an avatar of an America which they hate, because it is like a white and Christian America. And if I had to pick my guy to represent white Christian America, I don't know if I would pick Donald Trump necessarily, but for better or worse, that is who our guy is right now. And so they really do have a hatred for him. And that culminated, 10 years of media coverage saying that this guy is literally Hitler. He's going to institute literal Handmaid's Tale. He's a threat to democracy. He's a threat to your way of life. That eventually culminates in somebody trying to assassinate him. And yeah, by the grace of God, he was able to avoid that.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of tweets that went out saying oh my gosh, he missed and blah, blah, blah. That's disgusting. First of all, just in general, hate or love Donald Trump, somebody getting murdered is why is that something you guys are rooting for? And it's because they've dehumanized him so much. But also this kid, I mean, the social security or whatever, what is it? What are they?
The SS, Secret Service.
Thank you. Social security, whatever. They literally had a line of view. People were telling the cops about this. It was clearly to an extent, an inside job. Like, I don't think they could have covered that up. And then the head of Secret Service, she ended up actually resigning because of that
Hmm.
whole, like, everyone was just like, this was obviously a clear attempt and an inside job. And it's just the fact that, that happened. And now it's like breezed over.
Oh
Everybody's
yeah,
kind of forgotten about it. It's no longer like, oh yeah, Donald Trump was almost assassinated. Like, no, nobody's talking about it anymore. The news is kind of calmed down, or they say like, oh, he fell really hard, or
yeah,
it's like, really, it's
yeah.
just so insane how they can just blatantly lie to us, and it's more insane how people just accept it.
Yeah, I mean, they understand the power they have in commanding national attention. And so, the best way to deal with something like that, where your opposition leader survives an assassination attempt and then displays a truly unthinkable level of courage, where they don't know if there are going to be more shots, they don't know if there are additional gunmen. And he literally fights off his own security detail to turn to his crowd and raise his fist and say, fight, fight, fight. I mean, that is, for years we had to see depictions, whether it was in Broadway plays or even that movie that just came out recently, Civil War, where you had like some Donald Trump stand-in political figure be assassinated by these revolutionaries. And in all of those depictions, he was always very cowardly and begging for his own life. But then you see how it actually plays out, and the guy's literally like, yeah, shoot me again. I don't care. Fight.
Yeah.
And it's just like unthinkable. So, yeah, the best thing to do in that situation is to just completely give it no coverage, because whether or not you like Donald Trump, you see that imagery, and you even saw guys like Cenk Uygur or whatever from Young
Yeah.
Turks. Even he was like, "Oh man, that's bad," because that was powerful imagery. Because it was like on a human level, to the extent that you still can empathize with and recognize Donald Trump's humanity. You see something like that, and like that is a man struggling. That is a man displaying bravery and courage and being loyal to his people, knowing that they're looking to him for leadership. And so we just have to completely pretend that didn't even happen. So, yeah, the most significant political event since 9/11 is now less relevant in the average person's mind than, I don't know, Deadpool and Wolverine coming out. Did you see it?
No, I don't want to. Did you?
Yeah.
Oh no. Was it okay? Was it
No, it
good?
wasn't. I don't know why. So, like, I don't know. I don't like Marvel movies. I'm not like a big Marvel fan, but
Same.
it like we have to understand they did put Deadpool on the screen with Wolverine. You have to at least go, see what they did with it. If you were, a fan of that stuff growing up, and it was pretty bad. So
Ooh. Yeah,
yeah,
anything that Disney does now, I'm just like, it's not good
yeah, yeah,
because they just overdo everything. Star Wars, Marvel, any other genre that made them any money, they've
yeah.
made like a ton of the sequel. Like, mm,
They're even bringing back. I don't know if this is Disney's IP, but I was watching the trailers before, and they're making like another Alien movie. And Alien is like an iconic franchise, I guess, but it's nothing like a Jurassic Park or an Indiana Jones. And it's so funny, like the culture is so stuck in terms of media that they're not only just recycling franchises that have been historically successful and popular, they're now even like scraping the barrel, so to speak, for like what their lower rungs of the pyramid would be. It's like, oh shoot, okay, let's make another Alien movie or something. And it's like they won't risk just making something else, and trying to make something that could be like our generation's version of those big franchises or blockbusters. And so we're just stuck in this cycle of like seeing the same stuff, and because we have no self-respect, we will go for the nostalgia purposes, and we'll be disappointed every time, but we'll still go because it's like maybe they won't mess it up, and then they always just make it worse.
we
So,
watched well, we tried to, at least the other day, we tried to watch Godzilla versus Kong or something. I
mm,
don't really even remember. We literally it was like 2.5 hours long, and we watched like an hour and a half of it, and we're like, this is so awful. Let's just skip to the end. And we skipped to the end. The fact that like in the last like 30 minutes, 50 billion different things happened that were not relevant in the beginning of the movie was just so insane to us. We were like,
yeah,
what is this crap?
yeah,
But I mean, that's just media for you these days. It just goes downhill. And that's actually another thing I wanted to talk about was this whole like owning the libs thing. I
Mm,
think you probably did a video about this a while ago. I don't remember on your channel. I thought you did something similar to this, but I was recently looking, at popular conservative brands and channels and everything. The main thing that I notice is it seems like they're just kind of taking what the liberals do, but making it conservative, slapping like a conservative label on it, and then hoping it just makes the liberals mad.
yeah.
And it just feels like that's the whole personality of the conservative side now. It's not about like, you know, freedom or liberty or faith or what's right and this and that. It's more of just like, what make liberal mad? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, absolutely. And for what it's worth, I have done in my in my life a fair share of lib owning.
I mean, we all
But
have.
I do this because I do think that it is important to some extent to demoralize people who are professing opinions that are evil. So, like going into the election last cycle, I would go out with my megaphone and my microphone and I would like interview these people and I would try to make them look stupid, even though I was very polite and very cordial in doing so, because I wanted that footage to be out there and I wanted liberals to see their representatives looking stupid and I wanted our people to see me looking like really smart or whatever. And so I think that is important to an extent, but to base your entire like popular discourse around that is just ridiculous. And the reason people do that is because you don't step on any toes. Like if you want
Mhm.
to be, the top dog of conservative punditry, you can't really take like a hardline ideological position. I mean, you can define yourself as conservative, whatever that means, and say the basic talking points, but you can't risk articulating something that is more precise than that because then you might alienate some of your potential audience. But if you are simply defining yourselves only in opposition to what the libs are doing, then it's perfect because people might be more libertarian, they might be more pious, they might be more old school right wing or whatever, but we can all at least agree that like whatever it is the libs are doing is bad and we should be owning them. And so yeah, there are entire brands, multi-million dollar operations that exist purely on inputting what the libs are doing and then outputting a reaction that says this is bad. And people eat that up. I mean, they love nodding their heads along. So true. The libs are bad. But unfortunately, I mean, that's not going to be enough to stop them from doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I feel like also the liberals have a much better idea of how to kind of get their way. I don't know how to
Hmm.
explain that. I feel like conservatives are just kind of like a facade of what the liberals do. Like they are so good at infiltrating and getting products into these big name stores. And most of the time, these big name stores are liberal. And so it kind of creates the cycle of just like, oh yeah, we support each other, we get super big
Yeah.
brands, and then conservatives are over here like, we're here too, we're also here, and look, we made something that doesn't have a rainbow on it, so take that.
Yeah, they can only like exist in reference to what the libs are doing. And then even then, like when they try to make something that's like conservative, it's just like I've seen, here's our conservative like I don't want to name any examples because I don't
I
want
know
to
what
hurt
you're talking
anyone's
about
feelings.
already.
But it's like, oh, we have like a based beer and you drink this and you're like based because it's like right wing. And it's like, okay, dude, cool, I guess. I don't know. So it's like versions of everyday products, but like, oh, you need to pay more for it because then you're supporting our values. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's going to like some guy who's just like exploiting the well meaning impulses of American patriots, where it's like, look, I'm sorry, but if I need like toothpaste, CVS is right there and it's cheaper
Yeah.
or whatever. If I buy your base toothpaste, and it's not even like that it's better in ingredients. Like if you have like fluoride free toothpaste, it's all natural, I'll buy that. But it's like just regular Patriot toothpaste, and then it's like 2 weeks to ship it, and you're paying all this more. It's like you can't put that on me, dude. You can't say that the only way that we're gonna save the country is if you buy my Patriot toothpaste and it costs all this money and it takes forever to get it. Like that's not fair. And then even when we try to make like conservative art, it's just like this self-referential caricature of what it means to be right wing or conservative, very over the top, girls in USA flag bikinis, fireworks, velociraptors, machine guns, like just nonsense. And I think that's because, similar to the way that the pundits conduct themselves, nobody really wants to take a stance on what it means to be right wing or to be conservative, because then you risk, the headache of discourse and argument and things like that. And that's a lot more difficult than simply putting something stupid out there and raking in cash. And so even, you saw, for example, a network, which will remain nameless, put out their version of like a funny conservative animated show. And it was literally just like, people were saying it was Mr. Bertram. Daily Wire puts out Mr. Bertram, and everyone is saying this is like worse than 2007 Family Guy. Now,
Yeah.
I am a big fan of Peter Griffin, and I will not tolerate that disrespect. Family Guy today is like edgier and funnier than what they were putting out, because it's like every episode seemed to have just been like liberal white SJW character like rides up on electric scooter, and then like the stand-in conservative character and his like epic black best friend are like witty comment, don't they make those for men? And it's like, dude, it's animated, it's your
No, they don't.
thing, it's fiction, you could conceivably do anything, literally blank canvas, and what you come up with is still just like a scenario where we get to be smug and own them. Like there's no greater commentary. It's all just like the arguments you have with yourself in the shower, where it's like in my imagination, where he comes up with his moped and I say, do they make those for men? And it's like, what are you doing? But people were, eating it up. At least, their fans were. But I saw that most people were like, dude, what is this? And then I saw Dave Rubin made a version of that too, or it was like the Norm Show or something, and it was like this weird version of All in the Family. And so, yeah, it's just, a lot of these people tried to be successful in Hollywood, and then they were not able to do so, and then they find their niche in, conservative commentary. And it's not just people over Daily Wire. I mean, you see this everywhere, even with like some of the e-girl influencers. They try to go to LA to be models, can't quite cut it, and all of a sudden now they're doing, whatever. And so then they like almost use the money that is given to them from Patriots to then fulfill their like passion projects, which are these weird like attempts at right-wing art. Whereas if they just made something that just emphasized a classical virtue, that would be better. I mean, that's why like people make fun of me because I'll do like these film analyses on my channel, like why X movie is right-wing. But it's like, dude, it's true. And if you just focus less on trying to just make slop for your audience and more on just trying to make something that, can embody these classic archetypes, it would be far more productive and far more right-wing than making something where, we own a liberal yet again, but this time it's like an animated sitcom.
I agree. Well, also, I feel like to an extent, it makes conservatives look dumb too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes, I don't know how to explain it, but being Gen Z and being like as self-aware as I have become being on social media and everything since I was like 12, I think it also comes with like most of these animated shows that came out when I was like younger, like, Family Guy and all those, they always made fun of conservatives, in some way, like American Dad.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I feel like some of the animated shows coming out today that are quote unquote conservative, or the shows in general, actually just make the conservatives look kind of bad too. It's not like we're the bigger person. It's like, no, we're basically stooping to their level and just bickering like little children back and forth, instead of actually being like, no, we need to instill traditional values. Also, I would really love to know why on, Mr. Bertram, the wife is like a feminist.
Is she? I didn't know that. You're
Like,
telling me that now for the first time. I didn't know that. Wow.
I don't know if you're being sarcastic, but
No, I'm serious. I didn't, because I didn't watch it. I had a buddy who actually tried to get through it. And he told me, he's like, dude, John, I'll watch anything, dude. But like, I couldn't even make it through the first episode. And this guy will literally just watch anything. And yeah, I guess he couldn't make it through the first episode. So I didn't know that. I didn't know she was a feminist.
Yeah, she is like pantsuit, like girl boss type person. She's like a real estate owner, so she like repaints furniture and stuff. I don't know. But like obviously Mr. Bertram's like, "Oh, you're a woman, you can't hold tools." So she's like, "Well, I'll show you."
Yeah.
And then their daughter is like an activist for like trees or painting over wood or something with like
Yeah.
white paint. I'm like, what is this? Who is this for? Who is the
Yeah.
target audience?
And
And this
well,
is just for all
honestly,
of that media, not just Daily Wire, but all of it.
in a way, they're kind of right about their target audience, in a sad way, because I mean, think about the situation that Mr. Bertram is in. He is obviously upset with the way the world is around him and the way things are changing, but ultimately he's like totally impotent to do anything about it. His wife is a girl boss feminist. I think his son was like, a video game addict.
Yeah.
Daughter is like a libtard. like the best that he can do to control that is to make like a silly comment to his like libtard coworker. I mean, that is like the mean experience of a conservative man in this country, where it's like, well, I can't really do anything about my situation, but I've got my wit and I've got my, my sense of
Fear.
humor, and I will, at the water cooler, I will make a comment and I will epically own you. And it's like, okay, dude, well, your kids are like being taken from you by the woke mind virus. So you might want to take things a little more seriously.
You know what's crazy is all of these TV shows and stuff. I feel like I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, but in my mind, if you really want to make a difference with a TV show or something, stop putting freaking politics into everything. Stop making everything about something. Like,
Yeah.
why does everything need to have, you know, a cause associated to it? You know, the number one quote unquote adult TV show that Max and I watch that's a cartoon, Bob's Burgers, because there's never usually anything pushed in it that's like
Mm.
propaganda or anything. It's about a family who runs a burger joint in I don't actually know where they are. Um but the point is that it's like it's funny, it's cute. Usually there's no like major nudity or cursing or anything like that, and I think they actually do have some trans characters come on once in a while. They're like strippers or something. But even then, I feel like it's not shoved in our faces, meant to be like, oh, see, funny joke. It's
Yeah.
more of like, just like, oh, they're there. And it's like, whatever. And obviously, we don't condone that at all. But I feel like there's just no real propaganda in that. And I feel like if, as conservatives, we really want to reach people, we need to stop putting propaganda into our own TV shows. Why are we stooping to the same level?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because like the most popular television shows, I don't know when exactly it is, but we just had like the golden era of television in the 2000s, I think they call it, where you had shows like The Sopranos or Breaking
Hmm.
Bad. And those shows are apolitical in a sense, but they're actually like very profound if you really think about it. Like The Sopranos, for example, is a show essentially about like American decline. I mean, very frequently throughout that show, characters are speaking about and experiencing things that would have been, foreign to them. And I think part of that too is like the Italian culture maybe being emblematic of a more traditional culture that is facing, these progressive changes, and they're like often very confused by them. Or even Breaking Bad. I mean, that's a show like about a man becoming who he is. Like, you look at the first step, and so I watched that when I was 14, and I was like, ooh, drug dealing, that's interesting. I rewatched it recently, and I was like, this is actually like an insanely right wing show, because you look at the first episode of that show, and you've got this guy Walter White, and he's like a total nerd loser. He's had his business stolen from him by like his former colleague. His wife is like a total girl boss who doesn't respect him. His son, unfortunately, is disabled. He's picked on by his like Indian boss or Arabic boss, and so like he's like Mr. Burcham. He's not even smug about it. And then by the end of that episode, he is like the man, and his wife respects him, and he like beats somebody up or something. And then over the course of the series, he like becomes who he is in a sense. Now, obviously, we don't support getting people addicted to illegal drugs, but you look at the position he was in at the beginning of the show as a guy who was like completely domesticated, had no say in, the course of his life, a passenger to his own destiny, versus how he was able to channel that, in destructive ways. Yes, that could have been channeled much better. But I think the message behind it ultimately being something that is about a man's autonomy over his own destiny, I think is very positive and resonated with audiences for a reason. But yeah, I mean, if you made a show that was like, okay, we're going to take a mob, but then they have to deal with like the woke left, or, drug dealing, but they have to deal with like the libtard, it's like, it's not going to be the same. So, just make good media.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. There's no good media these days. And like we talked about, they just regurgitate old ideas because there's no new ideas, apparently. But when they do come up with like brand new ideas, and this is what just boggles my mind, brand new ideas like back in the day, like let's say Tangled, Frozen. I'm just saying Disney because I can't think of anything else.
Yes.
And
The, the,
like
the story of
Encanto.
Rapunzel being debuted in 2011. I remember that.
Like all of those were ginormous hits. And yes, they made a sequel to Frozen. They made Frozen 2, which I argue was better than the first one just because the music is a lot better in my opinion. But at the same time, like those were completely brand new ideas, blah blah blah. for some reason we have Wish, which is just a complete copy of Tangled, first of all, just the opposite. Instead of sun, it's a moon and blah blah blah. Um and also it's really sad looking. But like now they're just regurgitating everything. They're coming out with the live actions. They're coming out with
Yeah.
like all this stuff. But the originals, the original ideas that they came up with that were creative and interesting and colorful, those were the ones that made like the most money. And yet they are
Yep.
going to go through these like half-assed kind of things because why? Like besides just like, oh, it's cheap and like AI does our work now and da da da. I mean, I don't think that's true, but you know what I mean? I just feel like there's a lack of creativity and people are afraid to be creative because they're afraid of facing the repercussions if they went against what's the like quote unquote like norm, or
Yeah.
the status quo.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I mean, what's referred to as the competence crisis, where you are just staffing positions with people who are not competent enough to do them properly. I mean, you see this all throughout the country, whether it's in air travel or even food service. I mean, the service you get from people is beyond your grandparents' like wildest nightmare now, just because of the way the country has changed. And I think that obviously affects entertainment as well. I mean, if you look at like who was working at Pixar when they were making their best movies, it was like you see the photos of them like doing the sketches and the early animations. It's all like a bunch of really nerdy looking white guys. And it's like, well, maybe there was something to be said about that. And the same thing with video games. You look at who used to make video games when they were really good, and it was all just a bunch of like nerdy white guys doing it because they wanted to. Now you look at like video game development teams and it's all women and then men who have become trans because they have autism. And it's like, maybe that's why everything sucks now, is because the people who are literally in charge of making it are not as capable, but nobody has the, I guess, courage to tell people that their expression and their art actually is invalid, and not everybody has something to say. And some people have better ways of being creative than others. But that's like offensive now. And so we have to just like totally validate everybody's truth and everybody's take on the world. And then, you end up with slop.
And that's where the whole everybody gets a trophy trope goes. That's what
Yeah.
happens when everybody gets a trophy.
You can thank
Nobody
the
wants to
boomers for
work.
that. We get so much crap, the participation trophy generation.
Blech.
I didn't have a credit card. I wasn't picking up those trophies. Like somebody had to place the order for those, and those were the boomers. Those were our parents. It was their
Yeah.
choice to give those trophies out.
It's true. And it's like that was the biggest issue for me is like especially when I babysat, for 14 years. I've, babysat the same family for like 8 years. And when they were little, I'm like, yeah, there's a clear winner. You guys lost. I mean, I'm not going to be like, yeah, you guys suck and like da da da, but no, like so and so, finished the obstacle course the fastest. So
Yeah.
she gets like candy or whatever it was. And you guys just don't get anything because that's just how the world works.
Yeah.
That is just how it is. And they would tantrum for a little bit, but then usually the eldest would, share her candy with the younger ones. And I always made it fair because I don't think the oldest and the youngest could do the exact same thing. But it's like you have to do what's, but also it inspired the youngest to then do better like the oldest. And it made her want to work harder. The next time I went over there, she was doing what the oldest kid was doing through the
Yeah.
obstacle course. So it's like, yeah, there's going to be a tantrum, but parents also don't want to parent these days. And whenever I see like real parenting come across my Instagram feed, which is like so rare, but I'm just like, thank you. And by real parenting, it just means not letting your kid control you, being a
Yeah.
parent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of like baby content on my Instagram recently.
Aw,
I
babies.
think I don't know if it's because like when I see baby content, I'll watch it because I think babies are cute, or if it's like God trying to like plant the seeds in my head or something that it's time to start to take things more seriously. But I completely agree. People talk about how bad like millennials are or Gen Z are. Gen Alpha are going to be the worst ever because you're dealing with like a class of parents who all still have a chip on their shoulder from like when their parents told them no. And so they're
Yep.
like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay forward this generational trauma. And so they think that they can like get down to their kids' level and like have a Socratic dialogue with them over when it's time to like go to bed or turn the TV. And all that's going to do is teach the child, okay, wait a minute, everything ever that I ever experience, I should just like be disagreeable about and think that I can like argue my way out of everything or have a dialogue and everyone's feelings are valid and we just have to meet in the middle. And it's a complete like inability to entertain the idea that sometimes you just have to fall in line. Sometimes you just have to like take yes or take no for an answer, and that's the end of it. And as a parent, so like Matt Walsh, for example, had this tweet, I think yesterday, where he was talking about exactly this, where he's like, you should be able to say, because I said so, to your kids, and that should be enough. Because if you get into this cycle with them when you have to explain things, then you're wasting your time, and you're teaching them that everything is like up for debate, and you have to justify your reasoning to them. And I was like really resonating with that, because I've had the same conversation with girlfriends where I'll like tell them to do something and they're like, why? And I'm like, no, we are not, this is not a, I need to be able to just say this without explaining and walking you through my thought process, and you need to just like listen. And when they do that, everything runs so much smoother. And so I read that and I was like, I want to like follow up and tweet something out and be like, oh, Matt, this is so true. I do the same thing. But I didn't want to like get in trouble for being like, except I do this with adult women, not like children.
Awkward. Well, now the word's out. Now you're gonna
Yeah,
now you're
yeah.
gonna have issue.
But it's true. Husbands in the audience will understand. Things just go so much smoother when I don't have
Oh,
to,
yeah.
walk people through my thought process.
I mean, Max and I have that too. I think, especially when it's like so menial, like women and kids, they'll argue about like anything and everything just to be like, well, why? 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 And it's
Yeah,
like, for me personally, if it's not a huge decision that Max and I both need to decide on, it's like if he says, oh, can you do this? I'll be like, yeah.
yeah,
It's like, okay, here you go. And then maybe afterwards, I'm like, what's it for? Or like, what are you up to? But it's never just like, why should I do it? Huh? What's in it for
yeah,
me? What's going
yeah,
on? And for little kids, especially, I think when it comes to the faith, obviously, asking why we do stuff is important. And I think people, a lot of times when you say like, oh, just because I said so, they take it for like everything. They don't understand that it's just for like specific situations where it's just like you just need to trust your parents and realize
yeah,
that some things they just cannot explain. Like, for example, you're 16 and there's a 20-year-old online who's texting you, and your parents are like, yeah, no, that's not okay. That's illegal. And you're just like, but why?
yeah,
But just shut up.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I remember like my mom would get into that with me, like if I would be like, why? And she would do it. She would like try to, explain it. My dad was much more like, what do you mean why? No, it's just because I said so. And so depending on which parent I was talking to, I could like more or less see if I could like leverage what I want. And because that's the thing, I'm young enough to remember I wasn't doing that because I was like a curious child who wanted to know why I had to come to the dinner table right now and why I couldn't just eat later. It was just me trying to get what I wanted. And,
Hmm.
any rhetoric from like millennial parents that is saying, no, it's the child who's curious and needs authority explained to them, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you are just mad at your parents and think that like you can somehow be better than them because you're going to like do this with your child in a different way. But your kids are just going to end up even worse than you, and even more neurotic and annoying. So, yeah.
It was interesting because there was this video on Instagram that was going around for a while where a mom and her, I don't see, he was probably two. She put food in front of him, like it looked like cut up quesadilla, some peas, and like some grapes or something. And she put it in front of him. He's having a tantrum. He flings like his fork across the room. He's
Yeah.
crying and screaming. So she puts him down for a nap, and she's like, unpopular opinion, I don't. I just retry the same food over again. I don't just like give him whatever he wants. He has to eat the food I give him,
Yeah.
because we aren't always privileged, in, if you want to use that target word, privilege, to be able to afford a bunch of different food for our kids. And they have to grow up realizing that sometimes food is not like a great thing that you just get all the time. You should, of course, or the type of food that you should get all the time, but rather like you kind of just have to eat the food you're given because it's fuel for your body. You know what I mean? And sometimes you don't
Yeah.
always get the food you want. Like you can't eat ice cream every single day for dinner. But anyway, she showed a video of her son after he was done with his nap, and he was happily eating his quesadilla and peas and everything. It's just like
Oh, yeah.
kids will eat if they're hungry. And people in the comments were just like, I feel so bad because like, I just don't want to force a food on my kid that he doesn't want, just, and wait until he's starving or whatever. I'm like, obviously you guys have never actually been hungry or starving in your
Yeah.
life. Because growing up for me, I was never starving, I want to say, but I was definitely hungry. And by the age of 3, I learned how to cook mac and cheese by myself. So there was a whole story behind that. It's different now, obviously. I'm older. But I basically learned how to cook for myself at a very young age because food was not always readily available to me as a young child. So I grew up a lot on food that I could just grab out of the fridge, like butter and broccoli and frozen peas and raw carrots and,
Okay.
things like that. But it's like, I'm not traumatized by that. Like, it was just available to me, and I was like, yeah, I got bodily autonomy. I want a carrot. I'm going to go get a carrot. Like, I'm hungry. What's available?
The This is so funny. I was having this conversation recently actually with my mom
Oh,
because my sister is a big fan of, like, and this is what happens when you let women get degrees in psychology, because they start like getting these ideas in their head and then trying to look back on their life and like plug in all of these vocab terms into explaining like their life. And they want to like mythologize their experience in life, meaning everything throughout their life has to be informed by whatever happened previously, and it all has to be explained through this one grand narrative where you have character arcs and enemies and side characters and everything like that.
it's a
And
movie.
yeah, and it's like, sometimes things just happen, like, and you can't really explain it or retroactively try to understand it in a better way. But one of the things we were talking about was an impulse that she has to just be like, basically like taking issues that she's had with our mom that are just like complete, teenage girl issues, and then like explaining them through the lens of something silly like that. Like, this is because when I was little, mom wouldn't let me eat this food or whatever. And it's like, dude, like, look, I was there. I promise you that's not what happened. But it's like the same thing where, you have parents like this on Instagram. And when they were like a teenager, their parents probably wouldn't let them like have sleepovers with the opposite sex. And so then they're going to be like, well, this was
That's why
always a
I'm a
pattern.
lesbian.
Yeah, this was always a problem. Like, they made me eat food and they would abuse me. Like, they would tell that story of like, okay, time for a nap, and then come back and eat later. They would be like, they would use food as a weapon, and they would deprive me of nourishment and then isolate me in my room by myself. And I would be afraid. And now I have separation anxiety and anorexia and like all this crap. And it's like, can we just like, it's not that deep. I promise you, it's just not that deep. Like, get over it.
Yeah. Well, not to mention also, I feel like a lot of the times these situations that they're talking about are just an excuse for them to not be able to work on themselves and get
Yeah.
better. It's just like, this happened to me as a child and I'm still working through it and da 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 da. And it's like
Yeah.
very rare are things actually from like there are genuinely very big T traumatic things that can happen to you as a child. But being disciplined as a child and not disciplined as in like getting, beat like every night,
Yeah.
but just like being put in a corner for timeout, being having to go to your room for a bit and like and that's why like this whole, victim mentality thing is so damaging because it doesn't allow people to move on from their trauma. They just keep seething in it and they just, just continue just going in this cycle and they never heal and they become bitter. And then that get passed on. We see that through other generations, right? Gen Alpha now, because now millennials and Gen Z don't want to raise their kids with like religion or, any hardcore rules and, oh, they'll decide what gender they are. It's
Yeah.
fine. Oh, isn't she so cute setting fire to your curtains? Aw, little Kimberly.
Yeah.
Spelt like KEMBLXYZ.
Yeah, I find that the people I know or I've met that have like legitimately horrible things that have happened to them, you wouldn't really know.
Hmm.
They tend to be like very kind people, and maybe they do have sort of a softer disposition about them. But the people I know who are like the most neurotic and just insufferable, they are the ones who will be the first to tell you all about their trauma. And
Yeah.
I think it's just a tool that people use to like give themselves permission to just be selfish and off-putting people. And that's why they have to like mythologize and exaggerate these like really inconsequential things that have happened to all of us. Oh, your parent smacked you with the kitchen spoon in the butt, or you got sent to your room, or you had to eat food you didn't want to eat, or you had to deal with your uncle who would make fun of your degree or something. It's like, get over it, get a grip. I promise you it's not that deep. But they use that to then justify why 10, 15 years later, like they want to go live in the city and be like bisexual and not commit or get married. And it's like this all stems back to Thanksgiving 2009 when, and it's like, no, it doesn't. You're just like a horrible person. And that's fine. Some people are like that. Some people are just committed to being terrible people for the rest of their lives. That's fine. But let's not pretend that's it's because of some like isolated incident.
Well, my thing too is like when I was growing up, I was probably like 4 or 5, and my mom would cook dinner, and I was a very picky eater. But picky eaters are raised, not really, created. I was just raised kind of to be a picky eater. And she would make food, and sometimes I'd be like, no. And then she'd be like, all right, then you don't get any. And I'm like, cool. And then at night I would sneak some because I was hungry, but it was
Yeah.
like the kitchen was always open. I had bodily autonomy to be able to go get food whenever I wanted if it was available. But I just sometimes didn't. She was like, "Okay, so what?" And it's
Yeah.
just like I wasn't traumatized by that. I mean, there were things that I remember that I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll do it differently with my kids," but I wasn't just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to laminate about this for the next 25 years and like my life is over and I'm never going to eat peas again." Like what? Like
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. And it seems to be this cycle of social media, trauma or like psychology, this weird thing. Paganism too is somehow tied in with that, with like crystals and like
Oh
healing
yeah.
and
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
And then on top of that, I don't know how to explain it, but what you're talking about how like certain people have are genuinely just like horrible people or whatever, and the people who genuinely do have trauma, you'd never be able to tell. People reached out to me after like years and years and years, and when I was in high school and I was going through like a lot of tough stuff, and they were like, I never would have known. And I'm just like, that's because it wasn't your problem. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to spread it everywhere because it's not your problem. I had to work through it. And when we make it everybody else's problem, then we feel like, oh, well, I have to defend why, even though this person has a good point about why I should just get over it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, oh,
But yeah, most people who really have gone through something don't want to make it their identity or don't want it to limit them,
yeah.
or they don't want to identify as a victim. Whereas people who want to identify that way to justify like their own state of being, like they're much happier to, just go on all day about he said this, she said this, they did that, they betrayed me then, blah blah blah. They made their little comment, blah blah blah. It's just like very low class behavior. Like if you've ever hung around people who are legitimately low class, I don't even mean that in like an economic sense, but just like kind of know it when you see it. They
Yeah.
love going on about that, and he said it's always like drama, and there's always these big problems and everything else. And you do see that with any group of people. Like I have relatives who are definitely classier people, but they'll make their little side comments from time to time. Like I had an aunt who very famously did this one time. We used to tell this story where she was going on, she was like doing dishes at their house, and she was talking about how some group or someone else in the family had like made some comment about money and like, oh, they always feel like they have to focus on money this, money that, blah blah blah. And then it got quiet for a second, and then she like looked out the window above the kitchen sink and said something like, oh, I see the Johnsons have downgraded from a Cadillac to a Buick, or just something like that. And so we like made fun of her for saying that. So everyone does it. But if you've ever hung around people who are like legitimately just like low class, they don't have their life together, they love talking about all of their ops, everything
Hmm.
that's going on. And it's like, dude, I promise you that's not why you're in the position you're in. That's why, there's that meme going around that makes me die laughing where it's like the POV, the guy in your hometown Snap story, and it's
Yeah.
like this like fat guy, and he's like, hey, good morning, y'all. Monday morning. Hey, I know y'all been praying on my downfall. And it's like, dude, no one cares. But these people get in their own head and they're just like, everyone's against me. They want to see me fail. And it's like, dude, you work at like Foot Locker. Like there's not like this grand thing that's going on. You're not the main character. Just get through it, move on.
Well, I think that is the main issue, is the main character syndrome. I mean, we see it everywhere. Every single social media post is directed at one specific person, and that specific person feels so targeted that they have to comment a whole length paragraph, even though it has nothing to do with them. Or the friend who it's like you just mention an offhanded comment about just like, oh yeah, my um this is actually based on a true story. One of my friends and another one of my friends got coffee together, And she was just like, "Oh yeah, we're actually expecting soon." And instead of being like, "Oh my gosh, congratulations," she was just like, "I can't have kids." And she was like, "Oh,
Yes.
what do you say to that? What?"
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people cannot hear anything or process anything that is not through the lens of like me. So if you say that, I cannot like hear that as anything separate from me. It must be said in relation to me. And if I am infertile or something, like, I have to make it about me. And like, why would you say that? That's so insensitive. So, and
Yeah.
some people are just like that. And, you can't really change people. I think that's why people tend to get more conservative as they get older. You meet more people, you experience more in life, and you realize like people can't really change. Actually, you can't really just like give people more resources and opportunity and expect them to change. I mean, people pretty much are who they are, and it's maybe cynical to view it that way, but maybe it's also more accurate because you waste a lot of your own time and money and emotional bandwidth, so to speak, expecting people to change, and they just really won't. And so at that point, I think the ball's in your court to just sort of adjust yourself to that reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, wow, we've kind of talked overtime a little bit here, but
Yeah, we
since
were
now,
supposed to talk about politics, and we're talking about drama, and yeah,
hey man, I told you it was going to be conversational.
yeah.
People are going to love this anyways. But what do you think? I guess kind of just wrapping us up here. What do you think are some ways that we can do better? What are some ways we're going to, as Gen Z and hopefully future later Gen Alphas that are, not messed up, what can we do to make it better? What are we going to do? Any thoughts?
What? What do you mean? Like,
Like, what are we gonna do with all of this that's going on right now? How are we going to maybe not go back to the time of our grandparents where, yes, things were a struggle, but at least it wasn't like, at least you knew your neighbors, at least you could go outside, touch grass, social media wasn't
yeah.
so crazy. How do we kind of remedy that now that we have all of this kind of saturated into society? What do we do?
I think the first thing is just to remember that hope is a virtue, which means you have an obligation to like remain hopeful regardless of circumstance. And I think that people forget that. And a lot of times people like to black pill or be pessimistic, either because they are feeling the pressure of everything or because they want to let everybody else know how aware they are of all the problems. And so if you're like, oh no, maybe there is a way out of this, maybe we can improve our situation, they'll say, no, you haven't done the analysis that I have. Everything's actually so over. And it's like, dude, you can't know the incalculables. I mean, there have been so many times throughout history where through pure miracle things, I mean, the Trump assassination attempt not working, for example, you could not account for that. Just these things happening just completely randomly that can reverse the tide of things in a way that's advantageous for us. I mean, that's always on the table. That's never not on the table. Moreover, things have been far worse before. It's not over just because you have to see like gay guys kissing on television. Like, I promise you that there are opportunities for us to improve our immediate situation and further to create more of those opportunities for ourselves going into the future. So I would just say, don't despair, don't give into the black pill, stay hopeful. And a lot of the reason people don't is because they're just online all the time. Like, go outside, go to your gym, go be stupid with your friends. Like, Twitter's not real life, which
True.
I'll like go be with my friends. I'll still be on Twitter. So like, I get that you can meet somewhere in the middle, but I think you just have to be more involved with like real people doing real things, which I know is cringe because it's like, oh, touch grass, but there is something to be said about that. I know you can't exactly go, join a bowling league or something like maybe you used to be able to, but you can still go hang out with your friends. You can go do something. And if you're a young guy who's struggling to make friends, then you should go to a place where activities are being done because a lot of times if you try to just go to a place that is social, like, okay, I'm going to go join my church's like youth group, or I'm going to go maybe to like a store that sells something that I'm interested in, like a board game store or something. Well, one, at a board game store, everyone there is also going to be like socially autistic, so that's probably not going to be very helpful. But someplace like a gym or an MMA gym is very good. Honestly, I know Catholics don't have a problem with going to bars. You go to a bar and just strike up a conversation with people. I mean, everybody is sort of in the same boat here, where if you're a young guy trying to make friends, everything is very atomized. If you're not in school anymore, it's tough to be in an environment around people. the well, so to speak, has been poisoned because of, you know, homosexuals, where now it's like if a guy is too friendly to you for no reason, you're like, is this guy trying to? So we're all sort of in the same boat there, but finding a place where there are activities that can be done that can prevent you from having to just talk to each other directly, like that is very positive. And so I would do that, because at the end of the day, I mean, I don't think I speak for myself completely when I say, like, my favorite thing in the world to do is like just be stupid with my friends. And that gives me a large point of optimism moving forward in the future, because that is like the foundation for community and families, is like men coming together and being like, this is what we are doing. We are doing it here. But you can't really do that beyond abstraction if you don't have that in your real life. So I would say probably try to focus more on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, thank you, John, for coming on here and
Of
chit
course.
chatting once again. I mean, yeah, it's season 5. Last time I had you on was like what, season 2 or season 3?
Oh yeah, it's been a while since we've done the Religious Hippie podcast.
I think it's officially been almost like 2 years. So maybe we'll have to have you back on again.
Yeah, the people, they're gonna want to know more about these spicy takes on gossip and drama and things of the sort. Yeah.
We might have to do a live stream sometime. I think people will really enjoy that.
Yeah, I was prepared to come on here and defend my tweet about
Oh yeah,
the.
do you want to do that real quick? I mean, we have
Oh
time.
man, I misspoke. Basically, yeah. So the Catholics got mad at me. I had a tweet that was basically like, you know, if you are having all these children with all these different women, and then you're having that paid for by like welfare programs, you should have like an option to be sterilized to get your, you know, welfare benefits or whatever. And you're not supposed to use the word sterilize as a Catholic, which I know. And so that was the wrong word to use. But what I meant by that was basically like, look, these people are obviously behaving in ways that are reckless and irresponsible. We should not allow for this to happen. And so I could have, for example, used the word castration. I'm sure that you can find church precedent, you know, throughout history for, okay, this guy is going around, running around, impregnating all of these different women. We're paying for it. He's not present in the child's lives. Like, okay, maybe we should just like castrate this guy. I'm sure you could find precedent for that. But because I use the word sterilize, people who already hate me use that as an opportunity to say that I'm like insufficiently Catholic or whatever. So that was not the right word to use. But I do think that there does need to be a conversation at some point about like birth rates, because everybody's talking about, you know, pronatalism and how we raise the birth rates and things like that. And, you know, for example, like we were discussing before we went live, I don't think that it is necessarily a good idea to tell people that the best thing they can do to resist what is going on in the world is simply to hunker down and have as many kids as possible. Because obviously God loves the creation of life, but if you are bringing those children into a world that is so hostile to them as ours is, like, yes, that's not a reason to not have kids. You don't want to tell yourself like, oh, well, the world is just so bad, I'm just not going to have kids. It's just to say like, you should maybe explore other options too. Because if you just do nothing except say, I want to go homestead and have 9 kids, well, now those 9 kids are going to be tax chattel for, you know, this like satanic regime, and they're going to come hunt them down eventually anyway, whether it's through social media or the internet, making them convinced that they're like the opposite gender, or, you know, they literally hunt you down like has been done at Ruby Ridge or Waco or what have you. So it's not to discourage family formation at all. But I noticed that a lot of people are viewing the idea of a family as this sort of like anti-regime identity, where it's like the
Or like an
best thing I
army.
can do. Yeah, it's like, you know, the best thing I can do to resist what is happening is to just like start a family. And it's like, that is true. You should do that. But there's definitely more that can be done to remedy our political situation. And that does have to happen because, you know, Christianity has existed throughout history in masculine societies that have emphasized masculine virtue. It has existed in feminized societies, which are closer to what we are experiencing now. And it tends to coexist much better and for far longer in societies that are masculine. And so it is just to say, like, if we're looking at the state of the world where you've got, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of people who are alive now in the third world because people in America and Europe have just given them a bunch of money and resources, and they have not used those to create better civilizations or better societies, but they use them to instead just continue to have children. And now they all want to migrate into Western countries. are we going to be able to turn the other cheek and basically be like, look, man, we cannot allow for these people to pour into our countries? And a lot of Catholics get uncomfortable with that because they see, these immigrants who are coming in through the southern border, and they'll say, well, these people are coming from Catholic countries. Aren't we all the same under Christ? And it's like, that is true. But unfortunately, you look at the different practices of Catholicism throughout the world. I mean, there are influences of voodoo in African Catholicism. There are influences from Aztec culture in Mexican Catholicism. It's not enough to just wave the flag and say we're all Catholic, because we know as Catholics, I mean, like the parish I go to, there are wonderful people there from all backgrounds, but even a majority of Catholics are still identifying as like pro-choice, pro-IVF. So it's not enough to all have like a name tag on and say like, we're Catholic, we're all on the same page. Dude, unfortunately, that's not true. And if you allow for these people to come into the country, they're going to make a country that is less familiar to you and that is more hostile to your beliefs. Because while they might say that they are staunch Christian and staunch Catholics, you look at where these countries are polling on issues that you claim to be in support of, and they're like by majority, not socially conservative, by majority, not in favor of things that, staunch Catholics would say that they are strongly in support of, and to the point where even they can't support Trump because he's not hardline enough on these issues. So I think that the greatest force for Christian society throughout history has been Western civilization. And insofar as we are importing people who are going to make that into something different, that is not going to be good for Christians. And so it's just to say we need to have an honest conversation about that. I used a bad word and I got in trouble for it. Okay, I'm sorry, but still, it's important to discuss.
People are still going to probably find something to drag you over the coals about. So
haters will be prayed for. That's what we say.
You know it. I wish I had my Tumblr so I could like show it on here, because I would, but
right.
What are you going to do, But at least we cleared the air with that. Hopefully people will understand what you meant.
They're going to get mad at me.
I also think that a lot of people just, especially online and stuff, they find someone and they don't completely understand, like they've never watched your, like, let's say this is the situation, right? They've never seen your YouTube channel before. They don't know what you're about, blah 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 blah. They come across a random tweet and they're just like, they don't get it. And that happens to me all the time, especially with like my name, the religious hippie. They're just like, what, like hippie and Catholic? And hippie just means you're against whatever the popular thing is today. And what's the most popular thing today? Like transgenderism and all this stuff. And so obviously I'm like the opposite, because back then it was like love is love and like da da da, that's what the hippie movement was. But now for me, the hippie movement's like the opposite of that, because it's like, anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I did a speech about a year ago, and I was talking about how like the first paragraph of our Constitution uses the word posterity, meaning that the country was constructed for Americans and their direct descendants. And it shouldn't be that our country is just this economic zone where anybody in the world can come into and be just as American as the people who built the country. And I had this Catholic girl try to epically own me in front of my own audience by basically saying, well, how can you be a Catholic and, not support immigrants coming to the country if they're also Catholic? And it's like, look, man, like if we looked at the most Catholic identifying countries in the world are in Africa, Latin America, eventually you bring in a few million of these people, like law of averages is going to kick in and your country is not going to look like what you want it to look like. And so frankly, I don't believe these people when they say the most important issues are issues like, IVF or gay marriage or whatever, because if that were true, you would go move to a country that has the strictest laws against that in the world, which are in Africa, or probably Africa. So I think the most important issues, if you're speaking politically about what you want your country to look like, are issues of identity and things like that. And ultimately, I think that people spend too much time looking for spiritual salvation in a political model. If you want spiritual salvation, obviously, you look to spiritual institutions. There needs to be a political restoration that can exist to forward Christ's agenda, but that also doesn't have to necessarily be like completely, clean. I don't want to say like it has to be bad, but it's not going to look as squeaky clean as a lot of, I think, Christians want it to look, where they're like, I'm not going to support somebody unless they're, going on stage with the Bible and just reciting scripture. It's like, dude, these are politicians. Like, these are pretty much bad people. Sometimes they can be less bad, but ultimately they can do good things. And that's what's going to happen for our country to look like what it used to look like, 100 years ago, when it was a far more moral country. You didn't have to worry about something like politics in your day to day.
Yeah, 100%. And now the entire world is just saturated with it, and it probably plagues other countries' social media feeds too. All you hear is about USA politics, and
Oh, yeah.
it's exhausting, I can imagine. But I mean, yeah, we'll see where things go, I guess. Maybe we'll have to have another podcast after the election and see where things go.
Depending on how things go, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of that one. If Trump doesn't get back in, I mean, we could legitimately be set back decades, just because, they're talking about doing a mass amnesty now. And if we have 20, 30 million new Americans who are of voting age, like, there's no way that we're going to win an election federally. And people are like, well, what is it, winning elections? And it's like, unfortunately, yes, that does matter. That is how we are able to do things. Like, I don't like democracy either. I'm the first guy to say that, but we have to work within a democratic framework if we're trying to make our country better. And if they simply import new voters, then we are not going to be able to do that. So,
Yep. It's such a fun time here right now, isn't it?
yeah.
Well, we still got, what is it? August, September. We got like 4 months, so we'll see where we are in 4 months.
I'm optimistic. I'm white pilled. I'm ready to make America great again. So I'm not worried. I'm not pressed.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just like prayer, sacrificing, staying close to the sacraments. Like, that's like the important thing. We take action, and, Christ is king at the end of the day.
So true.
100%. Well, officially now, I guess we'll wrap it up now that we have all of that out of the way. But yes, thank you so much, John, for coming on again. It's always fun having you on and having these really interesting and deep discussions.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back. Thanks for having me, and I'll see you in season 6 or 7.
Yeah, we'll bring you back for the aftermath. We'll see where we are.
Of course, of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. And for everyone who listened today, I hope you guys learned something, enjoyed this podcast. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. And I will talk to you guys next time. Bye. Do you have questions or comments about today's episode? Email me at thereligioushippie@gmail.com or leave a voice message at anchor.fm/thereligioushippie. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Amber Rose and distributed by Metacortext Publishing. This podcast is copyright by The Religious Hippie, NFP. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for The Religious Hippie at thereligioushippie.com or find me on social media for other unique content. Thank you.